November 23, 1987. Park Township, Michigan. A quiet stretch of suburban road just outside Holland. The kind of place where neighbors wave from driveways, where doors are left unlocked, where the worst thing that usually happens is a car that won't start in the cold. But on this particular Monday morning, something was wrong. Rick Brink hadn't shown up for work. That alone wasn't alarming, people miss work, but Rick was reliable, punctual, the kind of man who called ahead. So when the phone rang at his parents' house and his employer was on the other end asking where he was, a quiet unease crept in. They tried calling the house. No answer. They tried again. Silence. And then Rick's parents did what parents do. They got in the car and drove over, telling themselves it was probably nothing, a late night, a forgotten alarm, some simple explanation waiting on the other side of the front door. There was no simple explanation. What they found that morning would shatter their family, haunt an entire community, and launch one of the most chilling cold cases in Michigan history. A case that would take over 2 decades, 2 relentless detectives, and 1 devastating secret to finally close. This is the story of Rick and Gail Brink.
Rick was 28 years old, hard-working, steady. The kind of man who showed up for his job, for his family, for the people he loved. In 1984, he was going about an ordinary workday when a coworker caught his eye. She was 19 years old, with dark hair, an infectious laugh, and a presence that filled a room. Her name was Gail. They fell for each other quickly, the way people do when something just feels right. Within a few years, they were married, a young couple with a home, a future, and the quiet confidence of 2 people building something real together. They had only been married 18 months. 18 months. That's all the time the world gave them. By November 1987, Rick and Gail Brink were newlyweds in the truest sense, still in that golden early stretch of marriage, still learning each other, still dreaming. They had just purchased a ranch house on Ransom Street in Park Township, a fresh start, a place to grow into. They never got the chance. When Rick's parents arrived at the house on Ransom Street that Monday morning, the first thing they noticed was the Chevy Blazer. It was parked in the driveway. Rick was inside it. He had been shot twice in the head. There was no sign of a struggle in the vehicle, no indication he had tried to run or fight back. Whoever killed Rick Brink had done so with precision and with cold, calculated intent. But it didn't end there. Inside the house, in the bedroom the couple shared, they found Gail. She was lying on the bed. A pillow had been placed over her head. She had been shot 3 times. The horror of that moment, a father, a mother standing in that doorway, is beyond the reach of words. 2 people they loved, gone. Their home turned into a crime scene. The Holland Sentinel would run the story on its front page. Papers across West Michigan picked it up, and at the funeral, the community gathered in stunned, grief-stricken silence. Rick's brother Bud would later recall how the presiding priest opened the service, not with comfort, not with scripture, but with something raw and unsparing. "This," the priest said, "is not the work of the Lord. This is the work of the devil." No one in that church disagreed. Police descended on the Brink home quickly. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office launched a full investigation. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, interviewed family members, chased down leads, and they found almost nothing. No murder weapon, no clear suspect, no witnesses who had seen or heard anything definitive that night. Theories circulated through the community like wildfire. Some whispered that the couple had unknowingly purchased a home connected to something dangerous. Others speculated about mistaken identity. Perhaps Rick or Gail had crossed paths with someone they never should have. There were even dark murmurs about a serial killer moving through West Michigan. But nothing stuck. One by one, leads went cold. Witnesses had no useful information. The case, so urgent and raw in those first weeks, began to lose momentum. And then, it stalled completely. Months passed, then years. The Brink family waited for answers that never came. A community that had been shaken slowly returned to its routines. And Rick and Gail Brink, two young people whose only crime was building a life together, faded into the tragic category of the unsolved. For over 20 years, no one was charged. No one was arrested. No one paid.
Here is what the investigators didn't know in 1987. What almost no one knew was that the answer to the Brink murders wasn't hiding in the shadows of some unknown criminal world. It was sitting at the funeral. Gail Brink had a brother. His name was Ryan Weingarten. He was older than her, present in her life, and in the days following the murders, he gave an interview to the Holland Sentinel. In it, he mourned his sister and her husband with apparent grief. "They were the nicest people in the world," he told the paper. "I've never seen a couple get along better than they did." He cried, he grieved, he played the role of a devastated brother. But in private, something else was happening. Shortly after the murders, Ryan began making statements to family members that were unsettling. His sister Cheryl recalled him saying, almost offhandedly, "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done it." To another sister, Lynn, he reportedly said he wanted to apologize to Gail because he felt like he had raped her. Then there was the matter of a .22 caliber pistol. Ryan had allegedly made references to owning one, the same caliber used to kill Rick and Gail Brink. These were not the words or behaviors of an innocent man in grief. They were the fractures, small, easy to dismiss in isolation, of someone carrying an unbearable secret. And that secret had a name. Ryan Weingarten and his sister Gail had a sexual history, one that stretched back to their teenage years. Whether it began as manipulation, coercion, or outright abuse, the prosecution would later argue clearly this was molestation. Ryan would claim during his own testimony that it was consensual. The jury would not believe him. But in 1987, none of this had surfaced, and so Ryan Weingarten went home. He got on with his life. He married his girlfriend, Pam, and he kept his secret buried for over 2 decades. In 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office did something that would ultimately change everything. They created a cold case team. Its mission was straightforward: go back, look again, revisit cases that had gone unsolved, and see if the passage of time and the changes that come with it had shaken anything loose. In 2011, 2 detectives were assigned to the Brink case. Their names were Venus Repper and David Blakely. What they inherited was a mountain of aging paperwork, documents so old that some had become flimsy and torn, requiring the detectives to literally tape them back together before they could read them. They had witness statements from 1987, old interview transcripts, physical evidence reports, tip logs that had gone nowhere. They read all of it, and then they started over. Over the next 2 years, Repper and Blakely conducted more than 200 interviews. They crossed state lines. They tracked down people who had moved away, built new lives, perhaps hoped the past had stayed buried. They were methodical, patient, and relentless. Detective Repper explained their philosophy simply. Loyalties change, friendships change. People who may have been hiding a secret back then no longer feel the need, or they've held that secret so long they want to get it off their chest. She was right. Slowly, people began to talk. Family members who had long harbored quiet suspicions about Ryan Weingarten started to share them openly. The statements he had made years ago about wondering if he could have done it, about wanting to apologize to Gail, began to surface in new interviews. The detectives circled closer. But they needed more. The key to the entire case had been there from the very beginning. Her name was Pam. In 1987, she was Ryan Weingarten's girlfriend. His alibi for the night of the murders was simple. He was with Pam, doing laundry. She had confirmed this to investigators at the time, and the matter was closed. By 2013, Pam was Ryan's wife. They had been together for over 25 years. She had stood by him,
kept his secret, and maintained the alibi that had protected him for more than 2 decades. But when Detective Repper re-interviewed her in January 2013, something had changed. Pam Wyngarden told the detectives the truth. On the night of the murders, before the bodies had been discovered, Ryan had taken her somewhere. He had driven her to the Brink home on Ransom Street. He stopped at Rick's truck in the driveway and showed her Rick's body. Then he took her by the wrists and walked her inside the house, into the bedroom, where Gail lay dead. He had shown her what he had done, and then he had driven away. Pam told detectives that Ryan had confessed to her that he killed Rick and Gail because he was consumed by jealousy, jealous of their happiness, their success, their life together, and because he was terrified that Gail would tell Rick the truth about what had happened between them. He killed 2 people to protect a secret. Ryan Wyngarden was arrested in January 2013, more than 25 years after the night he shot his sister and her husband in cold blood. The trial of Ryan Wyngarden began in early 2014 and gripped the community of Holland, Michigan in a way that little had since the murders themselves. Prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the case, the motive, jealousy, fear of exposure, and the desperate desire to bury a dark secret. The opportunity, Ryan had no verifiable alibi once Pam recanted, and the testimony, witness after witness describing the strange, damning statements Ryan had made over the years. Pam Wyngarden took the stand as the prosecution's key witness. She described in detail what Ryan had shown her that night, what he had said, what he had confessed. It was devastating. Ryan's own sister, Cheryl Murphy, testified against him, recounting the moment he had said he wondered if he could have done it. The loyalty of blood, it seemed, had its limits when weighed against the truth. Ryan himself took the stand. He denied everything. He questioned the investigators. He challenged the evidence. He claimed his wife had been coerced into testifying against him. He maintained his innocence with a defiance that struck many in the courtroom as deeply unsettling. The jury was not moved. On March 28, 2014, 26 years, 4 months, and 5 days after the bodies of Rick and Gail Brink were discovered, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. 2 counts of first-degree murder. The deliberation had taken just 4 hours. When the verdict was read, Cheryl Murphy, the sister who had testified against her own brother, spoke 3 words that said everything. "We finally got him."
The sentencing hearing was, by any measure, extraordinary. Ryan Wyngarden arrived in court having apparently decided that he had nothing left to lose. He delivered a statement that lasted over an hour, attacking the investigators, questioning the verdict, and maintaining still that he was an innocent man. Then he turned on the judge. Ottawa County Circuit Judge John Hulsing had presided over the trial with patience and composure, but as Wyngarden's statement grew increasingly combative, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. At one point, Wyngarden looked directly at the judge and called him unjust. Then he called him a liar. "You're lying now," Wyngarden reportedly said. "You are flat out lying." Judge Hulsing, unmoved, reportedly threatened to have Wyngarden's mouth taped shut if he continued. Then he delivered his sentence: life in prison, no possibility of parole. And before he did, he said something that cut through every bit of noise Wyngarden had made. "This was a brutal homicide. You are a brutal, cold-blooded murderer." Outside the courthouse, the Brink family stood together for the first time in years, not waiting, but exhaling. After more than a quarter-century of silence, of unanswered questions, of watching a killer walk free, justice had finally arrived. Rick's family, who had spent 26 years wondering why their son never came home, finally had their answer. It didn't bring Rick and Gail back. Nothing could. But it was something. It was truth. And in cases like this, truth is the closest thing to peace that the living ever get. 1 week after the trial ended, Detective Venus Ripper began boxing up 2 years of work, thousands of pages of documents, interview transcripts, notes taped together and read by lamplight, the painstaking, unglamorous work of justice, done quietly, without fanfare, because it was simply the right thing to do. "It's been a very emotional case," she said. "It's about these two people who were murdered. It's justice for Rick and Gail. We did our job." And they had. In the years that followed, the case inspired something else, a ripple of justice that extended beyond the Brinks. A close friend of the family, moved by the outcome of the cold case investigation, donated $100,000 to fund further cold case work in Ottawa County, the hope that other families, still waiting, might one day get the same closure. The work of Repper and Blakely proved something important, something that every unsolved case needs someone to believe, that the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides in the memories of people who were too afraid, too loyal, or too uncertain to speak. And when the right person finally asks the right question at the right moment, it surfaces. Rick Brink was 28 years old. He had a job he showed up to, a home he was proud of, and a wife he loved. Gail Brink was 22. She had a laugh that filled a room and a life just beginning to take shape. They had been married for 18 months. They deserved more. They deserved decades. They deserved the ordinary, extraordinary privilege of growing old together. Instead, on a cold November night in 1987, someone who was supposed to love Gail made a choice, a selfish, monstrous, irreversible choice, and two young lives were erased to protect a secret that ultimately couldn't be kept. The community of Holland, Michigan was never quite the same after November 23, 1987, and perhaps it shouldn't be, because the story of Rick and Gail Brink is a reminder, a hard, uncomfortable one, that evil doesn't always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it sits at the dinner table. Sometimes it attends the funeral. Sometimes it gives interviews to the local paper and cries in front of the cameras. And sometimes, just sometimes, it is caught. 26 years later, by two detectives with tape and determination and the unshakable belief that Rick and Gail Brink deserved better than to be forgotten. They were right.